I want to increase the size of the composition area, so in order to do that, I'll close some of these windows down, closing the frame for my info and audio, my time controls, and my effects and presets window. Now I have a little more space to see my animation. But once I put a pin into my image, creating a puppet mesh, After Effects will automatically bring up the information panel so I can see the information for my mesh, the triangle count, the number of pins I have for the mesh I'm working on, and the XY value of my cursor. I'll go ahead and continue to click, adding more pins to this puppet. Currently I have one mesh, and if I move these pins around, some of the mesh has a priority over other parts of the mesh. We can see this if I turn off the Show Mesh option. Here I can see the middle leg moving over the left leg. Putting it over to the other side, I can see that the middle leg has a lower priority than the right leg. In order to change this so that the middle leg is behind both the left leg and the right leg, I'll need to change its priority. Here under the Puppet Pin tool, I'll change to the Puppet Overlap tool. Once I've selected this, I get the outline for the original mesh that I created. Here it's represented by a dark green stroke around the outside of the object. I'll simply click once anywhere inside the outline of the original mesh. Once I do that, I'll highlight a small group of triangles. This is the area of influence that this pin has over the triangles in the mesh. I can change it by increasing the extent of its influence. By simply increasing it from 15 now to, say, 34, or we'll type in a value of 40, we can see that the range of influence starts from the blue pin, then moves out, gradually dropping off, reaching the extent of the overlap tool. I can create another pin, and as I create another pin, you can see where the two influences meet, the triangles become bright white again, meaning that they have much value. Now in both of these pins, there's a value of in front for 50%. That means it's currently at 50% either in front of or behind other layers with priority. As I increase the value of this pin's priority for the mesh, these triangles will become brighter. With this first pin selected, I'll change the in front value to 100. Here we can see more of the triangles becoming bright. If I make this further back by pushing this to negative 100, we see the triangles become dark, meaning that they're further away. We'll change this to a value of negative 50 and change the value of the top pin to negative 50 as well. What I want to do next is move the puppet pin, not the overlap pin. So I'll use Command P or Control P on a PC to navigate back to the puppet pin tool. Now I can select the pin and drag it either left or right and see that those pixels underneath that mesh are now completely behind both the left leg and the right leg together. I'll open up the timeline just a little more so I can see more of the parameters underneath the mesh. By twirling down the mesh, I can see that we now have deformation pins, the yellow ones, as well as overlap pins, represented by our blue pins. If I open these up, I can see that I have the two overlap pins, and under the deformation, I have 10 puppet pins, the yellow ones. However, I may want to name these puppet pins with the attributes that they target. By selecting each pin, I can use the return or the enter key on the keyboard, then type in the new name. I'll create the name for the hip, knee, and foot for each of the legs, starting with the right leg, center leg, and left leg. We've jumped forward in time so that you didn't have to watch me rename all of the points inside of this mesh. But now that we've renamed them all, you may want to group them differently. The puppet pin layer priority inside this mesh won't affect where the puppet pins lie. If I decide that I want to group all of the feet together, I can hold down the Command key or the Control key on a PC, then select the different feet, and move those into a position so that the right foot, center foot, and left foot are all together. I can do this similarly with the knee, holding down the Command key or the Control key on a PC, drag these down so that the knees are together. I'll do the last one for the hip, dragging the hip down to the other two hips. This doesn't modify any of the parameters for the position for any of the pins. If we move down, the same is true with our overlap tools. If we use Command P or Control P on a PC, we can rename these by using the return on the keyboard, then renaming it, and moving it from one layer priority to another. We'll add additional overlap pins for the left leg and the right leg as well. Note that both of these now have the same value as described by the last overlap pin that I created. With the Puppet Tool pins, the next pin I create will always use the values of the last pin created. So in order to change these, I'll have to go down into the timeline to modify them, or with them selected, modify the values up in the options for the tool. We'll go ahead and name all of the overlap pins to describe their position on the image. We sped forward again so that we didn't have to go through the naming convention for each of the overlap tools. Once you've named them all, it's much easier to see where these will be positioned.